Every legal encounter leaves a trace. Every strict investigation pursues honesty. Comprehending your legal rights, establishing true justice.
Out! Get out of the car right now!
For what? I didn't do anything. I merged over because I thought you were signaling the lane.
I wasn't signaling the lane. I was pulling you over. You took off.
I didn't take off. I pulled over the second I heard your siren.
You can see that on your own camera. Get out of the car.
I'm complying.
I just want to know what I'm being...
A deputy in Broward County, Florida made 3 mistakes on an ordinary Tuesday morning. He arrested the wrong teenager, he took the wrong phone, and he bragged about the wrong body camera. By the time he figured out what he had done, it was already too late. The footage was already in the wrong hands, and the woman holding it had beaten his department in court before. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt like a cop treated you like a criminal before, you said a single word, stay right here, because this story is for you. The body camera was already rolling when Deputy Reed turned away from the car he had pulled over and fixed his eyes on David's vehicle. It was 6 minutes past 7 on a Tuesday morning in Broward County, Florida. The road was alive with the particular rhythm of a school day, yellow buses signaling left, parents in SUVs inching through intersections, teenagers on crosswalks with backpacks swaying. The sky was pale orange at the edges, and the early sun came in low and flat across the asphalt, the kind of morning light that makes everything look calm before it isn't. David had left the house 22 minutes earlier. He was 17 years old, an honor student at one of Broward County's better-regarded high schools, a kid whose academic record was the kind parents quietly brag about at dinner parties. He was wearing his school uniform navy trousers, a white-collared shirt, backpack across both shoulders. Beside him in the passenger seat sat his younger sister Jade, 15, earbuds around her neck, a textbook open on her lap even though they were still in the car. They were running slightly behind schedule. David was focused on making up the time. He missed the exit. It was a simple error familiar to anyone who has driven a route on autopilot and caught themselves a half-second too late. The turn came up faster than he anticipated, the lane markings shifted, and before he could correct cleanly, he had passed the mark. He checked his mirrors, merged right to reposition himself, and continued forward, already calculating the next turn that would loop him back toward school. That was when he saw the deputy. Deputy Reed was standing in the road at a traffic control point, one hand raised. He was not in his patrol vehicle. His lights were off. His siren was silent. He was directing traffic with a hand gesture, the kind that, from behind the wheel of a moving car, in morning light, in the middle of a school day commute, could reasonably be read as a signal to change lanes. That is exactly how David read it. He merged right, as the hand seemed to suggest, and kept driving. Deputy Reed did not read it that way. What happened next unfolded in the span of about 40 seconds. 40 seconds that would take months to fully account for in a federal courtroom. The deputy moved to his vehicle. The lights came on. The siren followed. And David, the moment he registered both, pulled over. No hesitation. No acceleration. No attempt to extend the gap between his car and the one behind him. He simply pulled to the right, came to a stop, and placed both hands on the steering wheel. He had done everything right. It would not matter. Deputy Reed covered the distance between his cruiser and David's car with a kind of purposeful stride that had nothing procedural in it. This was not the walk of an officer approaching an unknown situation with appropriate caution. This was the walk of a man who had already reached his conclusion. His jaw was set. His shoulders were square. The body camera clipped to his chest was recording in high definition. He did not tap the window and wait. He did not position himself at the standard rear quarter angle that traffic stop protocol requires. He did not ask for license and registration through the glass. He did not identify himself by name or badge number. He did not explain, even briefly, why he had initiated the stop. He reached the driver's door and pulled it open. David, 17 years old, backpack still on his shoulders, had no time to respond to what came next. He was pulled from the vehicle and pressed against the side of the car with a force that was entirely disproportionate to anything the situation had produced. There was no weapon. There was no threat. There was no resistance. There was only a teenager in a school uniform, on a public road, in front of passing traffic, being handcuffed before a single word of lawful procedure had been followed. Jade did not move. She sat rigid in the passenger seat, her textbook still open on her lap, and watched her brother's hands disappear behind his back. The sound that came from her was not a scream. It was the kind of cry that lives below a scream, the kind that comes when the body understands something the mind has not yet processed. People drove past. A school bus slowed, then continued. Deputy Reed told David, standing cuffed against his own car, that what he had done constituted a felony. fleeing and eluding a law enforcement officer. The charge carried the weight of a future dismantled before it had fully begun, a criminal record, a college application poisoned at the source, a single morning rewriting every morning that followed. David had no criminal record, no warrants, no prior stops. His license was valid. His registration was current. His school uniform still had a crease in the sleeve from where his mother had pressed it that morning. None of it was relevant to Deputy Reed. The body camera captured all of it, the door yanked open, the hands cuffed, the charge announced. It captured Jade's face through the passenger window, the way her expression collapsed when she realized her brother was not going to be let go in 30 seconds. It captured the car's slowing to look, and the deputy's posture, which did not soften once during the entire exchange. It captured everything. That was precisely the problem. For Deputy Reed, it would become the central irony of his career. He believed the camera was his protection. He spoke to it like a man who knew he was on the right side of history. He had no way of knowing, standing over a handcuffed 17-year-old on a Broward County sidewalk at 6 minutes past 7 in the morning, that the camera would eventually be played on a courtroom screen in front of a judge, 2 attorneys, and the legal team of the Broward County Sheriff's Office until the department wrote a check for $3 million and terminated the man who had switched it on. He stood there, certain he was in control. He was not in control. He had not been in control since the moment Jade reached for her phone. Before Deputy Reed reached the driver's window, Jade had already moved. She had felt it before she could name it, the way the deputy's stride changed direction, the way the lights hit the interior of the car. Something in the quality of the moment told her that this was not going to resolve itself in 30 seconds with an apology and a wave. She unlocked her phone, scrolled to the contact she knew to call, and pressed the green button. The line connected on the second ring. The woman who answered was in the middle of her second cup of coffee, already at her desk, already deep inside a case file for a deposition scheduled later that week. Dr. Renee Lawson had been a licensed civil rights attorney for 15 years. She had argued before federal judges. She had cross-examined police captains, department supervisors, and city solicitors. She had a reputation in Broward County legal circles that preceded her into most rooms she entered. She answered the phone the way she answered most things, quietly and with full attention. She heard the door open. She heard her son's voice, confused, not aggressive, trying to understand what was happening. She heard the commands. She heard Jade beginning to cry. And Renee Lawson did not move from her chair. She did not raise her voice. She picked up the pen beside her notepad and she began to write. When Deputy Reed noticed Jade on the phone, his response was not to ask who was on the line. He did not pause to consider the implications of a minor passenger making a call. He reached across, took the phone from Jade's hand, placed it face down on the center console, and stated that phone calls were not permitted during his traffic stop. His attention returned to David before the sentence was finished. He had not ended the call. The phone lay face down on the center console, screen dark, silent to anyone who looked at it, and completely live. Every word spoken inside that car from that moment forward traveled through an open line to a desk in a law office where a woman with 15 years of civil rights litigation experience was still writing, still listening, still building. At one point during the stop, the deputy picked up the phone. He spoke into it briefly, not warmly, not with the measured professionalism the situation demanded, but with the particular tone of a man who has already decided that the person on the other end is not someone he needs to take seriously. Renee identified herself. She stated her profession clearly and without embellishment. The deputy's response lasted approximately 4 seconds. He set the phone back down. It was the most expensive 4 seconds of his professional life. Because what Deputy Reed did not know, what no one at that traffic stop knew except Renee herself, was that this was not her first encounter with the Broward County Sheriff's Office. 4 years before David's car was pulled over on that Tuesday morning, Renee had litigated a civil rights case against this exact department. A wrongful arrest, a pattern of procedural failures, a department that had underestimated the woman across the table. That case had settled for $900,000, and the experience had left Renee with something more valuable than the outcome it had left her with institutional knowledge. She knew the department's internal policy manual in granular detail. She knew which supervisory sign-offs were required before an arrest could be made during a traffic stop. She knew what a body camera timestamp could and could not prove. She knew the precise language the department used in form letters to delay accountability, and she knew exactly how long to wait before those letters became exhibits. She was not approaching this from zero. She was picking up where she had left off. Back on the roadside, Deputy Reed ran David's license through the system. The result came back clean. No warrants, no priors, no flags of any kind. The legal scaffolding he had constructed around the word felony had no foundation. He removed the handcuffs. He did not apologize. He did not acknowledge that the arrest had been made in error or that no procedural step had been followed correctly. Instead, he reached into his citation book. He wrote David a ticket for an improper lane usage violation for being in a right turn only lane and failing to complete the turn. It was a petty infraction, the kind that carries a fine and a handful of points. It was also, in retrospect, the most self-incriminating thing he could have done. Because what the citation proved, what Renee would later demonstrate in a federal deposition, was that he had known the arrest lacked justification, and rather than walk away from the encounter cleanly, he had chosen to leave David with something punitive anyway. That citation was not traffic enforcement, it was retaliation, and it was documented, dated, and signed. He closed with a speech. Standing beside David's car, facing his own body camera with the unhurried confidence of a man who believed the recording would vindicate him, the deputy spoke at length about what David should have understood, what the proper response to a hand signal was, and what the footage would show when anyone chose to review it. He mentioned, specifically, that he expected to hear from David's mother. He mentioned specifically that the body camera had captured everything. He was right about both. Renee set the phone down when the call finally disconnected. Her notepad held 2 full pages of observations, times, quotes, procedural failures listed in the order they had occurred. She had a live audio recording of an illegal arrest, a phone confiscation, a baseless felony accusation, and a deputy's closing monologue delivered directly into his own body camera. She had a department she had already beaten once, and she had a deputy who had looked at her credentials, taken approximately 4 seconds to decide she was manageable, and gone back to writing a citation. She capped her pen, she opened a new file on her computer. She was not emotional, she was not rattled, she was already working, and she had everything she needed. David went back to school. That detail is easy to overlook, but it matters. He returned to the same hallways, the same classes, the same teachers who did not know what had happened to him that morning before the bell rang. He sat through first period and second period and did not tell anyone. He was present, but the particular kind of present that happens when the body arrives somewhere the mind has not yet followed. His hands were steady, his notes were legible, and somewhere beneath the surface of a Tuesday that continued forward indifferently, the memory of his wrists in metal against the side of his own car sat quietly and did not move. Jade was different. Jade could not yet talk about it without her breath catching in her throat. The image that kept returning to her was not the handcuffs specifically, it was the moment just before, when she realized the deputy was not going to stop, and she understood, at 15 years old, that there was nothing she could do. That specific moment of powerlessness was the one that stayed. Renee filed a formal complaint with the Broward County Sheriff's Office within 48 hours of the incident. The submission was not a brief letter. It was a documented package, her own phone recording, a formal request for the body camera footage, and 15 pages detailing every procedural violation committed during the stop, cross-referenced against the department's own published conduct standards. Each failure was cited with the specific policy it contravened. Each timestamp on the recording was noted. The document read the way Renee worked methodically, without excess, and with the kind of precision that told anyone reading it that the person who wrote it already knew the outcome. The department responded with a form letter. Standard language, acknowledgement of receipt, a reference number, an estimated review period. It was the same type of response Renee had received 4 years earlier from the same office in a different case. She read it once, filed it, and opened the federal complaint she had already begun drafting. The lawsuit named the Broward County Sheriff's Office as defendant and cited 5 distinct causes of action: false arrest, excessive force, unlawful seizure of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and racial profiling. It was filed on behalf of both David and Jade. The demand was $5 million. The legal argument at the center of the case was not complicated because the evidence at the center of the case was not complicated. The body camera footage, the footage Deputy Reed had referenced by name during his closing speech on the roadside, was the spine of everything. It showed a traffic stop initiated without lights or siren. It showed a driver who pulled over the moment those lights activated. It showed a car door opened without any procedural foundation. It showed a 17-year-old removed from his vehicle before a single question had been asked. It showed a 15-year-old passenger's phone taken from her hand by an officer who never asked who was on the line. It showed a felony accusation delivered to a minor with a clean record, a valid license, and a school uniform. And it showed a deputy, at the conclusion of that stop, speaking directly into the camera with absolute confidence that the footage would protect him. Every frame was time-stamped. Every procedural failure was visible. When the deposition phase began, Deputy Reed sat across from Renee Lawson in a conference room with a monitor positioned at the end of the table. She played the footage from the beginning. She paused it, asked questions, and played it again. She worked through it timestamp by timestamp, moving forward only when the deputy had answered or failed to answer each question. He could not explain why the door was opened before identification was requested. He could not identify the legal standard that justified a felony accusation given the facts of the stop. He could not produce documentation of a threat, a weapon, or any conduct by David that met the statutory definition of fleeing and eluding. The citation became its own problem. What had been written as a minor face-saving measure, a right-turn lane violation issued after the arrest had already collapsed, became, under Renee's examination, evidence of something more deliberate. She established through the deposition record that the deputy had known, at the time of writing the citation, that the arrest lacked legal justification. He had run the license, he had found nothing, he had removed the handcuffs, and then, rather than conclude the stop, he had chosen to leave David with a documented punishment anyway. That sequence, arrest without cause followed by citation after exoneration, met the legal definition of retaliatory conduct. The citation sealed the case against him. The Broward County Sheriff's Office legal team was not unaware of what the footage showed. They were also not unaware of who Renee Lawson was. The prior settlement, $900,000, 4 years earlier, was on record. The pattern it suggested, combined with the clarity of the current footage, made a jury trial a significant institutional risk. Settlement discussions began before the case was scheduled for a full hearing. The figure agreed upon was $3 million. It was awarded to David and Jade as joint plaintiffs and placed in a structured arrangement that protected the funds and ensured their long-term benefit. It was, at the time of settlement, one of the largest individual traffic stop civil rights resolutions in Broward County history. Deputy Reed was simultaneously notified that he was terminated from the Broward County Sheriff's Office on the grounds of gross misconduct, a finding entered into his permanent law enforcement record, closing the professional door behind him with the kind of finality that does not reopen. David graduated. He did not talk about that morning often, and when he did, it was not the handcuffs he mentioned first. It was a quieter fear, the recognition that the outcome had been contingent on a specific set of variables that most people do not have. A mother who was a civil rights attorney, a sister who made the call in time, a phone that stayed connected. He understood without drama that without those variables, the morning would have ended differently. A bogus felony on his record, a citation in his wallet, and a version of his future that had been narrowed before it had a chance to open. He applied to college anyway. The trust covered tuition. Jade started a student organization at her school the following semester, a club focused on legal rights, education for young people. She was 15 when the stop happened. She was 16 when the club met for the first time. She was the reason the phone call went through. She had understood, in the seconds before the deputy reached the window, that the most important thing she could do was not react, it was to connect. Renee returned to her caseload. She had not raised her voice at any point during this process, not on the phone, not in the deposition room, not during settlement negotiations. She had moved through all of it with the same quality she brought to every case, controlled, precise, and absolutely certain that the record would speak if given the space to do so. $3 million. Filed, litigated, and resolved in near silence. And so the final irony belongs to the deputy in the form of his own words, delivered into his own body camera on a Tuesday morning in Broward County, Florida. He had said the camera had everything. He was right, it did. Every door yanked open without cause, every protocol skipped, every false accusation made in a school uniform, every second of a 15-year-old's phone being taken from her hand, and every word of the closing speech he delivered to himself, confident and unhurried, before sending 2 teenagers back to class and returning to his shift. The camera had all of it, and it played every frame, every timestamp, every miscalculation on a courtroom monitor, in front of a judge and 2 legal teams, until the county settled for $3 million, and the man who switched it on went home without a badge. He was right about the camera. He was wrong about everything else.
If you like this video, Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.
Truth is a continuous pursuit, and awareness is your best defense. Thank you for watching and championing global transparency.